Welcome back to the Talking Ketamine podcast. This is episode 61, The Emotion Filter.
Great to be here. Today we are looking at a study out of Paris by Yoldas and colleagues. We are looking at a symptom of depression that doesn't get enough attention, how it physically changes the way you read other people's faces, and whether ketamine can repair that visual filter.
Imagine you are just sitting across from your best friend at a coffee shop, right?
Yeah.
They're telling a story, they smile at you, but your brain processes the whole moment like a really badly dubbed movie.
Right, yeah. The visual is there, but the audio or the timing is just a little off.
Exactly. You hesitate, the moment passes, and then the conversation just lurches forward, and you're left feeling entirely out of step. And we usually think of treatment-resistant depression, or TRD, as this private internal cage of sadness. But the reality is that it completely disrupts the invisible split-second math of human connection.
It does, yeah. It alters how you actually physically see the people around you, and that discrepancy between the internal feeling and the external friction, it's just profound.
It really is.
Historically, clinical assessments of depression focus almost entirely on the interior. The questionnaires ask about your sleep or your appetite or feelings of worthlessness.
Yeah, they treat it like a checklist of isolated solo experiences.
Exactly. But humans are apex social processors. I mean, the vast majority of our brain's daily energetic output is just dedicated to monitoring the social environment. We are basically evolutionary scanning machines.
So if that scanning machinery is compromised, you aren't just sad in a vacuum, right?
Yeah.
Your entire relational world starts to break down.
Right, because you are constantly trying to decode these micro movements, like a twitch of the jaw or a really brief furrow of the brow.
Or even just the tiniest shift in a gaze. And if the hardware running that decoding software is glitching, you just start missing crucial signals.
Yeah, and consider the negative feedback loop that creates for you. If your brain is struggling to process social cues, you might start misinterpreting a completely neutral resting expression as hostile.
Right, like you think someone is judging you when they really aren't.
Exactly. Or, just as damaging, someone gives you a warm, reassuring glance, and it simply fails to register. You get absolutely no emotional payoff.
Wow. So without that subtle, continuous flow of microaffirmations from the people around you, the world just rapidly begins to feel cold and dangerous.
It does, and you naturally pull away.
It's kind of like walking around with bad social Wi-Fi. Like
Sure.
the visual data of your partner's face is right in front of you, the router's plugged in, but the signal is just lagging.
That is a great way to put it. The lag is everything.
Yeah, you're constantly buffering the interaction. And over time, trying to force your way through that lag makes every conversation so exhausting that you just eventually stop trying.
You withdraw, which obviously deepens the isolation even further.
Right. But I have to ask, if the problem is a micro lag in reading a face, how do researchers actually measure bad social Wi-Fi? Because it sounds nearly impossible to quantify a feeling of just being out of sync.
Well, that challenge is exactly what makes this research from the Paris Brain Institute so compelling. I mean, the team utilized an incredibly elegant design to actually measure the unmeasurables here.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How did they do it?
They recruited 24 patients suffering from severe treatment-resistant depression. Now, these are individuals who have already endured at least 2 standard conventional antidepressant trials with absolutely zero relief.
Got it. So really tough cases.
Exactly. And they compared this group against 35 healthy, non-depressed control subjects.
Okay, setting up a baseline comparison is pretty standard. But the actual testing mechanism is where it gets interesting, right? I mean, I mentioned they aren't just holding up flashcards of cartoonishly happy or sad faces.
No, far from it. They used a really sophisticated facial emotion recognition task. So participants sat at a monitor and were shown photographs of actors expressing one of 5 states:
Which states?
happy, sad, angry, fearful, or just completely neutral. But instead of showing the peak of the emotion, the researchers used digital morphing software.
Oh, so they blended them?
Basically, yes. They generated images across 5 different intensity gradients. So starting from 0%, which is a completely blank, neutral, resting face, and scaling all the way up to a 100% intense expression.
You know, that morphing is crucial because it actually mirrors reality. Like if you are talking to a colleague, they rarely give you a giant, theatrical, 100% angry scowl.
Right, thankfully.
Yeah, you're usually just trying to navigate a 20% flash of annoyance or maybe a 30% polite smile. It forces the brain to do the heavy lifting.
It demands subtlety, and that is exactly where the depressed brain usually struggles. So the participants simply had to observe these morphed faces and press a button to categorize the emotion.
So they had to balance speed and accuracy, I assume.
Exactly. And the researchers tracked the TRD patients across a very specific timeline. They tested them at baseline, then again just 2 to 4 hours after their very first intravenous ketamine infusion.
Wow, that is fast.
Very fast. And then a final time 1 week later, after they had completed 3 infusions total.
Did the healthy group do the same scheduling?
They did, yeah. The healthy control group followed the exact same testing schedule just to rule out any improvements that might come from simply practicing the computer task.
Okay, so let's look at the baseline data first, before any medicine is introduced. My assumption, just based on how depression is usually talked about, is that the TRD patients would be heavily biased.
Biased in what way?
Like, I would expect them to constantly flag neutral faces as sad or angry. So did they fail the accuracy test?
Well, this is where the data fundamentally challenges older psychiatric assumptions, because at baseline, the patients with treatment-resistant depression were actually just as accurate as the healthy controls.
Wait, really? Their accuracy was identical. They didn't have a negative bias skewing all their answers.
No negative bias at all in this specific paradigm. I mean, they successfully identified the subtle smiles, the flashes of anger, the neutral resting faces.
So they matched the healthy group's accuracy rate completely.
Completely. The fundamental difference wasn't in getting the right answer. The massive glaring disparity was entirely in their speed. The TRD patients were significantly, measurably slower to hit the button.
Okay, I have to push back on the implications of that on behalf of the listeners. Because if the patients are ultimately getting the answers right, why is a slight delay categorized as a problem?
That's a fair question.
Right. Like, being slow and deliberate could just be seen as being careful. Isn't getting an accurate read on someone's emotion the only thing that actually matters in the end?
Well, if you are taking a written exam, absolutely. Take all the time you need. But human social interaction is not a static test.
It's more of a fluid dance, I guess.
Exactly. It is a rapid, fluid dance. Split-second timing is the actual bedrock of emotional connection. Think about a fleeting expression of sympathy from a friend.
Right. Might only be there for a second.
Or even just a few hundred milliseconds. If you are slow to process it, by the time your conscious brain registers the empathy, the conversation has already moved on.
Oh, I see. You have completely missed the critical window to reciprocate.
Exactly. You are left staring blankly while they are offering a real moment of connection.
So going back to the analogy, the Wi-Fi lag makes you appear cold, distant, or aloof to the other person, even if, 2 seconds later you finally realize they were being kind.
Yes. That delay is the relationship killer. And this is where the Paris team deployed a relatively new field called computational psychiatry.
Oh, to figure out the why behind that lag.
Precisely. Instead of just observing that patients are slower and leaving it at that, they used a mathematical framework called the drift diffusion model.
Drift diffusion model. That sounds like a concept from fluid dynamics, not psychology.
It does sound intense, yeah.
So how does applying advanced math to a button press actually tell us what is happening inside the mind?
Well, the premise is actually quite intuitive. It operates on the understanding that recognizing a complex visual stimulus like a human face is not an instantaneous magic trick.
It's more of a process.
Yes, it is a rapid, active process of evidence accumulation.
Like a literal gathering of data points.
Exactly. So imagine your brain contains a bucket.
Okay, I'm picturing a bucket.
When a face flashes on the screen, your visual cortex starts furiously dropping visual clues into that bucket.
What kind of clues?
Things like the angle of the jaw, the tension around the eyes, the slight parting of the lips. Each tiny clue is a drop.
And you just keep accumulating these drops.
Right, until the evidence in the bucket hits the rim. That rim is what researchers call the decision boundary.
Oh, I get it. The moment the water spills over that boundary, your conscious mind triggers the decision.
Right. You realize, oh, that's a smile, and your finger pushes the button.
So the brain is constantly doing subconscious math, basically piling up evidence until it hits an acceptable threshold of certainty.
Yes. And by analyzing the reaction times against the accuracy rates, the math allows researchers to actually look inside that microsecond machinery.
Okay, so what did they discover inside the TRD patient's machinery at baseline?
They found two distinct structural impairments that were causing the social lag.
Let's break those down. What was the first breakdown in the machinery?
The first impairment is a prolonged non-decision time.
Non-decision time. So going back to our metaphor, Does that have to do with the bucket?
Actually, no. It has nothing to do with the size of the bucket or the rate of the drops falling into it. This is the raw mechanical time it takes to simply perceive the bucket exists and then physically move your arm to push the button.
Oh, wow. So it's the time required to encode the visual image on the retina, pass it through the visual cortex, and then fire the motor neurons to move your finger.
Exactly. The hardware itself is lagging.
The actual neurochemical transmission is bogged down.
Clinically, we refer to this as psychomotor retardation. It is one of the most debilitating physical hallmarks of severe melancholic depression. It is a universal slowing of thought and physical movement.
You know, I think everyone can relate to a milder version of that, like that feeling when you have been away for 48 hours and someone suddenly tosses a set of keys at you.
Oh, definitely.
Your eyes see the keys, you know you need to catch them, but your hand just reacts a half second too late.
Exactly. And that physical, heavy lag is happening to these patients during standard social interactions.
That is heartbreaking. So their literal clock speed is just dialed down.
It is. But the researchers found a second, even more complex impairment. The math revealed that the TRD patients had significantly wider decision boundaries,
Oh, meaning their internal evidence bucket was physically taller than the healthy controls.
dramatically taller. They required a massive surplus of evidence, I mean, way more clues, to feel confident enough to actually commit to a choice.
Were they gathering the clues slower too?
No. And that's the fascinating part. They were accumulating the clues at a perfectly normal speed. Their drift rate of gathering data was totally fine.
But they were just trapped by a paralyzing need for absolute certainty before they would allow themselves to react.
Yes, exactly.
So it's like being a brilliant detective who has actually gathered all the right clues, and you've solved the mystery, but you are so paralyzed by self-doubt that you refuse to make the arrest until you check the evidence 10 more times.
That captures the tragedy of it perfectly. I mean, you have the data, your ultimate accuracy will be spot on, but you are suffocated by decisional conflict.
Because when you have been depressed for a long time, the brain learns that the world is punishing.
Right. It adapts by becoming hypervigilant and overly cautious. It just second guesses its own perception constantly.
And if you are second-guessing whether your own spouse is smiling at you or grimacing in frustration, you're going to be a crucial step behind in every single interaction of your day.
The cognitive load required to just exist in a room with other people must be staggering for them.
It sounds exhausting. And keep in mind, these participants have treatment-resistant depression. They have lived with this heavy, doubtful, sluggish social processing for months, sometimes years.
Yeah, standard SSRIs haven't repaired the machinery. Which brings us to the intervention phase of the study.
All right, what actually happens to this computational math when you introduce intravenous ketamine? But before we get to the math of the face reading, let's establish the baseline clinical effect. Did the ketamine actually alleviate their subjective feelings of depression?
It did, yes. Aligning with the broader wave of modern psychiatric research, the ketamine induced a rapid, robust clinical improvement. The patient's subjective depression scores plummeted.
So the heavy internal cloak of sadness actually lifted.
It lifted. But the core mission of this study was to see if the drug also physically repaired the visual processing filter.
Right, did it actually shrink the bucket and speed up the motor?
The results were striking. Following the treatment, the TRD patients became significantly faster at identifying the emotional expressions compared to their own baseline.
That's incredible.
And more importantly, their improvement in speed was much greater than the healthy control group.
Which proves this wasn't just a matter of getting better at the computer game through repetition. So let's map out the timeline of that repair, because you said they were tested at 2 very specific intervals, right? Just 2 to 4 hours after the first IV drip, and then again a full week later. How quickly did the brain's hardware actually reboot?
The timeline reveals a lot about the mechanism of action. Just 2 to 4 hours after that very first infusion, the non-decision time shrank significantly.
Wow. The physical lag, the psychomotor retardation, was the first thing to heal. That sleep-deprived, slow-motion feeling just evaporated.
Yes. The raw processing speed of encoding visual data and executing a motor response sped up almost immediately.
Because ketamine triggers a massive surge in glutamate, right?
Right. The brain's primary excitatory neurotransmitter. That surge rapidly restores synaptic connections that have withered away under chronic stress. It literally turns the clock speed of the brain back up.
But what about the bucket?
Well, at that 2-hour mark, their decision bucket was still a bit too tall. It took longer to fix the doubt.
Oh, interesting. So they could physically move faster, but they were still demanding too much evidence before making the call. When did the boundary normalize?
It wasn't until the end of week 1, after they had received a cumulative total of 3 infusions, that their decision boundary narrowed back to the exact same size as the healthy controls.
Okay, so their bucket shrank back to a standard functional size.
Exactly. They no longer required an exhausting excessive amount of proof to read a human face.
They could just gather a normal amount of clues,
Hmm.
hit the rim of the bucket, and confidently recognize a smile or a neutral glance without second-guessing their own reality.
Right.
You know, it is fascinating that a drug, often categorized as a dissociative anesthetic, actually operates to rapidly reassociate people with the subtle reality of their environment.
It is a profound paradox, yeah.
I do have a vital question about how it alters that perception, though.
Sure, what is it?
Did the ketamine change what emotions they were fastest at recognizing? Like, did it artificially skew their brain to prioritize happy faces and ignore the angry ones?
That is a critical nuance, and the answer is no. It did not hand them a pair of rose-colored glasses.
So it wasn't just forcing artificial positivity.
Not at all. Both the healthy controls and the TRD patients, both at baseline and after the ketamine treatment, were consistently fastest at recognizing completely neutral faces.
Oh, that implies the medicine isn't just a chemical joy filter onto the visual cortex.
Right. It simply restores the objective machinery. Recognizing a neutral face quickly is evolutionarily important. It tells you the environment is safe and stable.
That makes a lot of sense.
Ketamine didn't make them manic or hyper-focused on joy. It just fixed the speed and confidence of their neutral processing. It allowed them to accurately absorb reality at the normal speed of human interaction.
I think this brings us to a chicken and egg scenario that is incredibly relevant for anyone listening who is navigating mental health treatments.
I know exactly where you're going with this.
Right, like, is the ketamine directly curing the internal feeling of sadness, which then frees up the brain to process faces faster? Or is the ketamine fixing the raw processing speed and the decision boundaries first, which then allows the person to reconnect socially? And that social reconnection is what actually cures the sadness.
You just articulated the core debate in modern psychiatric pharmacology.
Oh, really?
Yeah. There is a powerful framework known as the cognitive neuropsychological theory of antidepressant action. It proposes that treatments like ketamine work exactly in that reverse order.
Meaning the chemical doesn't instantly make you happy.
Right. The chemical repairs the hardware, it fixes the neuroplasticity, shrinks the decision boundaries, and eliminates the motor lag. That hardware repair gives you the physical capacity to interact with the world differently.
And as you interact differently, as you finally start catching those micro smiles in real time, as you stop misreading neutral faces as hostile, your environment starts rewarding you again.
Precisely. You aren't awkward, so people engage with you more.
The isolation breaks, and the mood lifts as a downstream result of feeling connected.
The medicine unlocks the door, but the subsequent social re-engagement is what actually pulls you out of the dark room.
Which makes understanding this computational math incredibly important for our daily lives. Because this isn't just abstract data about fluid dynamics and reaction times. It translates directly to the intensely human experience of feeling profoundly alone.
A delay of a few hundred milliseconds in recognizing a smile might look like a trivial data point on a lab spreadsheet, but in the real world, that micro delay is the difference between a conversation flowing and a conversation dying.
It makes a joke fall flat.
Exactly. It makes a supportive glance go entirely unnoticed by the person who needs it most. That breeds awkwardness, and awkwardness breeds a desire to hide.
So by normalizing how quickly and confidently a patient gathers social evidence, ketamine isn't just ticking a box on a symptom checklist.
No, it is actively handing them back the tools required to survive as a social creature.
It is quite literally giving them their social reflexes back. I look at this data, and beyond the promise of the medicine itself, I see a profound mandate for empathy.
How so?
Well, if you have a partner, a sibling, or a friend who is deep in a depressive episode and they seem cold or they don't react when you offer a warm expression, it is incredibly easy to take that personally. You feel rejected.
Oh, absolutely. It is a natural human reaction to feel slighted.
But the math from the Paris Brain Institute demands that we look deeper. They are ignoring you. They aren't actively choosing to be distant or ungrateful for your support.
Right. Their brain's evidence-gathering machinery is physically caught in a slowed-down, overly cautious loop. Their internal bucket is impossibly tall, and their physical motor is running on fumes.
For anyone listening who has ever been in the grip of a severe depressive episode, if you have ever felt that terrifying sensation of observing humanity from behind a pane of thick, soundproof glass, this data is deeply validating.
It really is.
It proves that the feeling of being socially out of sync is not a personality flaw. It isn't evidence that you are fundamentally broken, awkward, or unlovable. It is a measurable, physiological, and most importantly, treatable processing issue.
The sheer dynamism of the brain is the most hopeful takeaway here. I mean, the fact that researchers can measure a physical motor lag shrinking in a matter of hours and deep-seated cognitive decision boundaries normalizing in a matter of days, it proves the brain is not permanently cemented in its depression.
The machinery actually wants to repair that connection.
Yes, it is waiting to run at full speed. It occasionally just requires the correct neurochemical catalyst to clear the cache.
It leaves you with a lingering, fascinating question, though.
What's that?
If a single medicine can so rapidly fine-tune the invisible math of how we filter visual cues like a smile, what other subtle sensory filters is depression quietly altering that we simply haven't learned how to measure yet? Perhaps how we process the tone of a voice or the physical sensation of a comforting touch.
That's a great thought. We are really only just beginning to map the edges of how deeply our biology dictates our reality.
So ketamine isn't just changing how we feel on the inside, it's actively repairing how we process the people around us.
Exactly. It reminds us that depression is an information processing disorder. By studying the math behind these split-second decisions, we can see exactly how the medicine helps the brain gather social evidence again.
Helping us see each other clearly. Thanks for listening to the Talking Ketamine podcast. We'll catch you on the next one.